Welcome back to the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast for episode number 151. With certified Goleman Emotional Intelligence coach, Renée Adams. Renée Adams is a children's book author, writing books that teach children and parents foundational emotional intelligence skills, including being able to identify and name their emotions. We've seen the importance of this skill that started with the founding director of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, Marc Brackett, on episode 22 with his book, Permission to Feel, and then again with episode 28 with Dr. Daniel Siegel, who talks about the importance of naming an emotion to tame it. I'm Andrea Samadi, author and educator from Toronto, Canada, now in Arizona, and like many of our listeners, have been fascinated with learning and understanding the science behind high-performance strategies in our schools, sports, and the workplace, with ideas that we can all use, understand, and implement immediately. When I was introduced to Renée Adams, I saw her background as a certified Goleman Emotional Intelligence coach, and I immediately contacted her to see if I could pick her brain on many questions that I'm asked about emotional intelligence. Why not ask an expert when I have the chance? Let's meet Renée Adams. Welcome, Renée. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to speak with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea, for inviting me to be a guest on your wonderful and most helpful podcast. I have already learned new things from listening to some episodes, and I have a new goal in mind, and that is to listen to every episode because it has great value. And so I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, Renée, are you still located in Boulder today? Are you in Boulder, Colorado?
I am, yes. I am located, in Boulder, Colorado.
Got it. Well, I almost moved to Boulder from Toronto when I was first considering moving from Canada to the US. I considered Colorado because it was the Columbine tragedy that motivated me to move and get up and try and do something back in the late 90s when that happened. And I looked at, I think it was Mile High, Colorado, and I really struggled with the altitude. So that's why I chose Arizona, because I thought I can handle the heat, just not the lack of oxygen.
It's not unusual for people to experience difficulty with the altitude. So I can just say that Arizona is a lucky state that they got you, and it's Colorado's loss. But I know you're such a valuable member of your community there. And so I'm glad you can tolerate the heat.
Definitely. Definitely.
I love heat. I do fine in altitude, but yeah, Arizona is a beautiful state.
It sure is. I'm so lucky to be here. So, Renée, I did watch some of your other podcasts as I was researching and learning more about you and your work centered around emotional intelligence. And I'll link the episodes that I watched in the show notes so people can dive deeper into you. But at what point in your career did you see the importance of teaching emotional intelligence to children and parents? What's the missing link that you saw?
Well, thank you for asking. This is a very interesting question, and it has a multifaceted answer. And I just thought about mentioning what you said about the Columbine experience. I have friends who have had children during that tragic event. And just because of the mentioning of it, and it's at the forefront of our minds, I'll just say that I think there's so many tragic events that in hindsight, there have been red flags and signs that had people been more aware and had more empathy and been more aware of socially of what was happening, I think a lot of lives could be saved. So I congratulate you for being motivated to come and do something, to help based on that tragic experience. And so my reason for wanting to teach young children emotional intelligence really goes way back. And it began with a journey with my own parenting. So in 1995, I went to a parent information night that my son's school offered, and I heard about Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence. It was a New York Times bestseller at the time, and I read that book and started to implement what I learned in my own parenting. And so that really began my journey of learning more and more about emotional intelligence and applying it to parenting specifically. My oldest son was 8 at the time. He's now 33. And I had a 4-year-old son. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I was going to be adopting a girl from a special needs orphanage in Siberia in 2003 when she was 2 years old. And then from 2008 until 2011, as part owner of a senior care business, I incorporated emotional intelligence learning in my training of caregivers, especially in the areas of self-awareness, empathy, and compassion. And in the spring of 2011, I began attending writing workshops with a desire to learn how to effectively write for young children. In 2016, I had completed my first children's book titled Calm in Your Palm, which later has now become the overarching brand of my business. And I had gotten my feet wet developing an augmented reality app that went along with that book. And then in 2019, I had completed my second children's book with an even more in-depth augmented reality app experience. Unexpectedly, I then decided to rethink my overall goal and strategy pertaining to this new entrepreneurial path. What I really want to do here is give credit to a brand consultant, Denise Young, with whom I worked. And she's the one who actually tied in what I wanted to accomplish with my authorship of children's books and the toys that I was developing. So she noticed on LinkedIn that I was connected with emotional intelligence groups. I had shared with her that in January of 2016, I traveled to the Kripalu Yoga Center, and that's in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And Daniel Goleman and Tara Bennett Goleman were leading a weekend seminar on emotional intelligence. And I took every book that I had, which I think were all of the books that Daniel Goleman had written. I told him he was one of my heroes. I had him sign my books during a book signing that he did for the participants. And just based on me sharing and that information, and she saw my enthusiasm and belief in the benefits of emotional intelligence, she's the one who really made the brand focused on emotional intelligence. I was writing about feelings and the concepts, but I hadn't really labeled it, as emotional intelligence focused. So she gets the credit for that. And then the journey that I'm now on is teaching at a very young age, like ages 0 plus, emotional intelligence, and also putting information out there for parents to learn about it, to know how to role model it, and to know how to begin teaching it starting with infancy. And therefore, that's the launch of Hoppy and Poppy Pink Cheeks, which officially launched April 2nd of this year.
Very neat.
Now, these books are starting at ages 0 plus. So I have them targeted at 0 to 3, but 4 and 5-year-olds are really enjoying them as well. So I would say it's very applicable to 0 to 5, but focused on 0 to 3.
And I cover the 6 social emotional competencies on this podcast, and I've got them on the header of the podcast, and they correlate to CASL.org's competencies, and they're in my Level Up program that I use. But can you explain the competencies that were important in the Goleman certification? Because I haven't taken it, but I feel like they're similar. And how would you teach these competencies to a parent or a child? What's the focus of the Goleman certification.
Yeah, well, I absolutely do agree with you wholeheartedly that you have to incorporate fun. When it comes to teaching children, and we're talking, toddlers and preschoolers, babies, toddlers and preschoolers, having them interested, focused, engaged, and then on up, more like your girls, I think maybe, what are they, like 10 and 12? 8 and
Yeah,
10?
yeah. So 9 and 11.
9/11. Yeah. And I knew it was just from past podcasts, they were somewhat in that age range. So I do have some ideas. I have another brand that I'm going to launch for the next age group up. And so just keeping it fun and entertaining is super, super important. And that's, an absolute goal of mine. So I love the 6 competencies that you've stated that you're focused on. And I agree, that's so important to be skilled in those areas. There's some overlap, certainly. I haven't really come across very much disagreement within competencies, but there's a lot of overlap, and there's just a lot of different ways that they're labeled and described and categorized. But the 12 EI competencies that are part of the Goleman EI program, I'll just read them here to you. There are 4 pillars, and within the self-awareness pillar, there is the competency of emotional self-awareness. So just one of the 12 under that pillar. And then in the second pillar, which is self-management, there are competencies of emotional balance / self-control. So that's 1. Adaptability, achievement orientation, and positive outlook. And then within the social awareness pillar, which I sometimes refer to as others awareness, it is under the Goleman EI model officially called social awareness pillar, but there are competencies of empathy and organizational awareness in that pillar. And then finally, the relationship management pillar encompasses competencies of influence, conflict management, inspirational leadership, coach and mentor, and teamwork. And from these, I personally found much growth in the area of adaptability. At the beginning of the Goleman EI coaching certification program, we all, as participants in the cohort that I was involved with, we took the Korn Ferry 360 assessment. And it highlighted that my family members, not my peers or coworkers, but my family members reported that I could improve in the area of adaptability. So I took it to heart. I was very grateful for the feedback. And I, really have focused on that one more than the other 11, although they all applied to me. I've grown immensely from learning about all of them. But in particular, I'll just share as an example the adaptability competency through the Goleman EI coaching program. And there are key points. The first key point is adaptability is all about your responses to change. It can be as simple as shifting your communication style for a changing context, like putting on your accountant hat versus your marketing hat. But it can also be how you deal with disruptive change, or whenever you're faced with fear, anxiety, and stress. Secondly, developing adaptability means adapting a new mindset about change. Do you see the opportunities change represents, not just the risks? Do you see yourself as empowered to act on the change rather than just being at the mercy of forces beyond your control? Thirdly, notice where you might have gotten stuck due to a rigid view or attempting to solve a problem with the same failed strategies. Practice being open to different ideas and perspectives. By allowing yourself to be challenged and by opening up, you will discover greater success in solving problems, receive more support from others, and increase your capacity for creativity and innovation. Lastly, the fourth key point is you can strengthen your adaptability through deliberate practice. When you feel yourself responding to change with stress and anxiety, take 3 deep breaths. I do this a lot. Then repeat the self-coaching action steps, which I'll go into here in a minute, as a way to find the positive in the change and transform your perspective so you can move to action. And we really do dive deep, and then we have conversations with our coach about it. So coaching is kind of like it's like with a sport. I think when we think of the word coach, we're mostly, I think, trained to think athletically. And when we're training in a sport, it's one thing to read about, exactly how to be skilled at that sport. It's a totally different experience, though, when you have someone coaching you in a whole different perspective than you would on your own. And that's how it is with the coaching process. I think a trained coach, but the benefit of having someone reflect back to you, what you're communicating and what you're experiencing, and asking pertinent questions is life transforming. It really is so impactful. And so the first step was get moving. Do some form of aerobic exercise for at least 15 to 20 minutes a day. And this is specifically for increasing the skill of adaptability. Secondly, refill your emotional gas tank. Engage in at least one activity daily that promotes renewal. Some of these research shows are walking in nature, extending kindness, practicing yoga, or doing some form of meditation. And then as the days go by, it's important to note what happens to you mentally and physically when you refuel your gas tank, and think about which of the activities based on your analysis you want to engage in more often. So the program involves journaling, as I mentioned, and it's a great way to reflect on concepts and how they apply to you personally. Through journaling, I noted that the mental and physical actions make a huge difference in my well-being. I feel rejuvenated from aerobic exercise. When I read my journal entry this morning, Andrea, it really helped me a lot, because this is from a couple of years ago. And I realized that the stress I'm currently feeling, which is due to the fact that my work has become increasingly more demanding, and I haven't had the resources to hire more people at this point. And it really helped me a lot, because I had written about biking early in the morning to my gym and Pilates workouts. And I'm still going to gym and Pilates workouts daily, but I haven't taken the time to bike there. And that was a great reminder, because I wrote about it rejuvenating my mind and body from the fresh air, seeing other people out and about, feeling the breeze, hearing the river, because there's Boulder Creek. It's not a river, it's really a creek. Boulder Creek runs right through the town that I live in, and it's a path that I take to the gym. Wow. And so, it was a great reminder. So preparing for this podcast and reflecting on, some of the EI work that I've done, tomorrow I'm going to bike.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so important. All these things you were talking about, bits of other podcasts have come up, like taking mental breaks was just in the one I'm editing before we went on live. This guy that's a memory expert, Dave Farrow, was talking about how important it is when he's training people on memory, and he's in the Guinness World Book of Records for memory. And he was talking about how you've got to take those breaks or else your brain depletes. And that's been on so many different podcasts that I've talked about the brain network theory and shifting from your focused work to giving yourself those creative breaks. And so you talked about that. We all need those breaks to be productive. And these things are not taught to us anywhere. So I love that you've got that training and that you're putting it in programs for. I never even thought about teaching emotional intelligence to my kids when they were that young, like 0. I would say things to them like when I put them to bed, like you're going to be successful, you're going to have everything you want, like trying to give them that positive feeling, but you never know, like, is that really doing anything?
I think positive affirmations is huge. The second book that I wrote that I didn't end up marketing because it was not very consistent, like a different illustrator, different style and everything than my first book, but it was all about positive affirmations. So I mean, I think that's beautiful. And to answer your question about how I would teach these concepts to children, there are 3 free downloadable guides that can be found on hoppypoppy.com. And for any listener who's interested in receiving those, Hoppy Poppy is HOPPYPOPPIE, but on HOPPYPOPPIE.com, there are 3 downloadable guides. And so the guides are full of can do today tips. And I know, Andrea, your podcast is focused on takeaways that are immediate suggestions and things that people can do right away. And that's what all 3 of my guides are focused on, exactly that. The first one is the Hoppy and Poppy Learn Love EQ Guide, titled 5 Key Tools You Can Use Today for Teaching Your Child EQ Fundamentals, essential for early childhood development. And it teaches parents the basics of emotional intelligence, what it is, its history, and in general, what the goal is for 5 key skill sets: being self-aware, able to self-regulate, self-motivate, empathetic, and able to effectively handle relationships. So as early as we can give our children a vocabulary of emotions and the language taught to them that they need to express themselves, the better off they're going to be. And the Hoppy and Poppy Pink Cheeks Baby Board books that I've written, the Not So Scary and What We Feel board books, they equip babies with knowing the names of even more emotions than the emotion wristbands, which has the 6 primary emotions. And so, babies really love these 100% silicone, they're baby safe, for 6 months plus, wristbands. And these are the primary emotions: happy, sad, scared, excited, angry, and calm. And then the books expand that vocabulary. They have some of the same emotions in the books, but they expand it through storytelling. And so babies and toddlers and preschoolers learn the names of, I haven't counted them. I would say probably I need to count them, about 15 emotions, I think. And so just like we begin reading books before a baby is verbal about the names of animals and the sounds they make, colors, numbers, and so on, we really want to be sure that we're reading stories that talk about emotions and feelings. It makes a big difference. And then the guide number 2 is titled 5 Easy and Fun Tools to Teach Your Child Mindfulness, a Life-Changing EQ Skill. An example of teaching mindfulness to a young child is teaching them to be aware of their breath and body awareness. This guide gives many specific examples for how to do this. And the Hoppy and Poppy Pink Cheeks emotion wristbands are on a sleeve that says, start the conversation about emotions and body awareness. And so, once these wristbands are taken off the sleeve, a parent just has a little guide.
That's really cool.
Thank you. Like, what is the shape of your mouth when you feel happy? What happens to your eyes when you feel sad? What happens to your heartbeat when you feel scared? What do your arms do when you feel excited? How do your eyebrows look when you feel angry? What do your hands do when you feel calm? So just starting to begin the conversation about body awareness. Guide number 3 is 5 important tools for teaching your child compassion and empathy, critical EQ skills for social learning. The guide's first tip is to role model self-empathy and compassion. A child learns by hearing a parent state out loud phrases such as, I accept myself as I am, and I respect my desire to be organized and on time. That would be an example of what something that a parent might say that's positive, that a child absorbs. or I'm not perfect, but I am whole. So showing self empathy and self compassion and role modeling that teaches a child then to adopt the same behavior. So it's also really important for parents to be very aware of how they talk about themselves to other people when the child is within hearing distance. And so, what a child overhears can make a profound difference. Sometimes we don't think children are paying attention.
Oh, yes, they are.
But yes, they are.
You're downstairs, they're upstairs, and they're answering your questions.
Yes.
That's what happens in our house. They're always listening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's many ways to involve a child with acts of compassion, even when they're little, even before they can really draw a picture, they can just scribble, and you show them that you're putting it in an envelope and sending it to grandma because maybe she's feeling a little bit lonely, and it'll brighten her day when she gets that in her mailbox. Or, you're taking a meal to a friend who's had surgery or is sick, and they can be, whatever age, that they are, once they're old enough to do even the tiniest thing, it's starting to teach them that compassion. And then my book, What We Feel, is featuring Patu, and he's a 100% organic cotton 14-inch square blanket. And Patu is a character that takes Hoppy and Poppy through a journey of feelings. And Patu is saying, Hoppy and Poppy, now how do you feel? And so that teaches children to become very comfortable with that question, for one. Now, how do you feel? It's also bringing a present moment perspective into it. And Hoppy and Poppy's feelings are changing throughout the book and with the environment that they're in. And so it teaches young children that emotions change, which is really important that they learn that as well as empathy.
This is really good. And what is impressive is that I came from the publishing side of things. I was at Pearson after I had moved to the US after my teaching. I had a chance to go and look at, how products are created and marketed. And what I see behind you is so engaging. So as a rep, a former sales rep, I can imagine taking these to schools and how educators would eat those up. Are you in the schools with them? Where are you right now with this? Because my sales mind is just going crazy.
Thank you. I need a salesperson. I don't have a salesperson at this point. So, but what I'm just been focusing on so far is my website, sales and trying to direct people, parents, particularly of young children, to my website. And I do have 3 different combinations on Amazon Prime. And so direct to consumer has taken all of my time and energy so far. But I certainly do want to reach out to schools, daycare centers, retail. But I'm just taking it one step at a time. So I'm not there yet. But thank you for that encouragement and support. I appreciate it.
No, I've got some ideas for you. When we finish this, definitely you need to get this product seen by the major publishers out there, because this is an arm that publishers are looking at right now. And I don't know where it is or where it goes, but you can't have something this good that people don't see. So that's why I'm grateful to have this opportunity to interview people and things get seen, and who knows where it could go. But I think that you really need to show this to the major publishers just so you can see where it can go. I don't know, but that's definitely one idea. You can't ignore that, because I spent so many years carrying around different products, and that's perfect. That would do very well, I can tell.
Thank you. I did not know that you had that background, Andrea.
Yeah, that really helped after I worked in with Bob Proctor and I moved to the US and September 11th happened. Everything fell through with what I was doing with the youth program. I got into Pearson and I did really well with sales because of my background working in the seminar industry, selling seminars and being coached by some of the best in the seminar industry and on work ethic. So it was easy to just go out and do really well in sales with some of the things that we were taught, how you make use of your day. And so that was definitely the step before I left the corporate world to create my own products, which is why I also know how hard it is once you've created it to get it into the right people's hands. So I can kind of see two different sides that. And any educator that would be watching this would recognize how much work has gone into that.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I'm looking forward now to getting on your website and seeing what your products are, because I didn't realize that you've got some products as well, and I'm sure that I can benefit from what you've put together. I know you put a lot of time and effort into your work.
Definitely, it's been a 20-year thing, and a lot of my stuff went online into an online membership area, and a lot of it really is ongoing. So you always create new things. So right now the focus is to create new stuff because especially with this area of neuroscience, things change. I have to do some work and create a third book right now, and all the time that I've got in my day, I'm going to add like writing another book, but that's just what has to happen. But just going back and looking at when I launched the podcast, my episode number 1 is on the importance of setting up an emotional intelligence program or training in your workplace or school. And it's funny thinking back to day 1 because I interviewed my husband and he actually had just got off a work trip and he put his suit jacket on my desk and it was right here. And I said, speak into the microphone. Here's some questions I want you to answer. And he hadn't even had dinner yet or anything. He just looked at me and said, okay, I'll do this for you, because he knew I wanted to get this podcast thing started. But just from your experience, why do you think it's so important to teach these skills at an early age, and what's missing from the corporate world? Like, you're starting early, but it travels all the way through the school age. What's missing in the corporate world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Does your husband pronounce his name Mahid?
It's Majid.
Majid?
Yeah.
Majid. So I did listen to that episode
Oh,
and
cool.
really, really enjoyed it a lot. And I wrote down, something that he very aptly said and shared, and that was that research shows that teaching these skills result in immediate and long-term improvement in academic achievements and are a better predictor of success than academic ability alone. So it's very exciting that the benefits of learning to have high emotional intelligence is now supported by studies, even though, as we all know, in the field of emotional intelligence, it's a new field. Anything based on science and research, it's new and it's only a few decades old. But now, fortunately, it has been just long enough for very solid long-term studies over a span of, say, 30 years. It has taken place. And we know that it increases academic performance and school readiness. So why not teach at the youngest age possible to prepare a child to be ready for school and to be socially, capable of handling relationships, forming friendships, and understanding others, having some empathy with balance to it. That's important. But in my first guide, I mentioned the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child, housed at the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University. And they published a very informative paper about early childhood brain and emotional development. Emotional intelligence can be taught beginning at infancy, according to these studies. And regarding the corporate environment, sadly, Andrea, there are still many corporations which are led by individuals with a command and control way of leadership, and it is oppressive, and it's proven now that that is not the most effective way for corporations to have their leadership teams perform their jobs. And so the results of research and studies which have been published point to the importance of high emotional intelligence in effective corporate leadership. And one thing I wanted to share with you is that I didn't know if you knew this, but Daniel Goleman and his son Hanuman Goleman, they now host a podcast. It's fairly new. It's been out for, I don't know exactly how long. They have a handful of episodes. It's wonderful. I love it. I subscribe to it and listen to them. It's first person plural. And they make it very easy on the Key Step Media website, that is their website, to order these primers.
Wow.
And they are just a great source of information about emotional intelligence competencies. And there's a primer called Effective Leadership, and I wanted to read you when it comes to corporate environments what Daniel Goleman's report is on a study that he did. And he compiled information that he obtained from 100 organizations, and he states, what I found was quite revealing. It turned out for jobs of all kinds at all levels, on average, emotional intelligence was twice as important as cognitive ability in terms of the distinguishing competencies of emotional intelligence. And the higher you go in the organization, the more it matters. If you look at top leadership positions, C-suite positions, you'll see that 80 to 90% and sometimes 100% of the competencies that organizations independently determine to set apart their star leaders are based on emotional intelligence. And it's encouraging to me that my two sons, David and John, they are software engineers, and they work for more progressive tech companies. And I am so thrilled to hear them talk about the culture that these companies that they're working for have adopted. And, for example, my son John, they have a Friday sharing time. So no work is discussed, but people bring like pictures from when they were kids and stories from their lives, and they just get to know each other. And they build those valuable relationships, and they get to know each other as individuals and as people, and that's valued. It's worth the time that is set aside to do this, and it's recognized as being important. I just think that's fantastic. And my son David, he works for a little larger company. Right now they're working from home, and they really miss each other, because in the office in downtown Denver, it's like very open, and there's not a lot of distinction between different levels of management. And there's just a lot of camaraderie, and they're very, very supportive. My son David and his wife Danielle had a baby. My granddaughter Isabel was born January 23rd of this year. And the company, paid for some house cleaning, paid for an allowance for ordering takeout. They paid for a sleep consultant, which made a huge difference. They really did provide some really good resources for them to take advantage of. So it's encouraging, is my point. I mean, there are plenty of corporations that are lacking in having a positive and affirming culture for which people spend so many hours of their time, but the positive side is that there are newer companies and some older and more established companies who have also started to recognize the importance of emotional intelligence and have transformed the leadership in their organizations, which is a very, very good thing. We need to see more and more of that, and I believe that we will.
So do I, with as we continue to learn and share these ideas, I think that a lot of people are doing things the right way. When I hear about other people's work environments, they're setting up things like this. And it just reminds me of how things were before we were so hooked to our devices. When we would talk to people on the telephone, or we would go knock on their door and see them face to face, instead of texting and the impersonal side of how everything has gotten. It's just bringing us back more to the way things were back in the day when we were more connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which kind of makes me think about my home life. And growing up in my house, we definitely did not talk about our emotions in my home. So if I was ever upset or I would cry, my dad would yell at me because he just hated to see emotion. He didn't want to see it. His exact phrase was, "Stop the waterworks." And I knew what that meant. It was like I was going to get a kick in the butt because he didn't want to deal with it. And I just couldn't hide it. It was just who I was. You look at my face, you know what I'm thinking and feeling. And now as a parent, I'm learning all these new strategies, and I'm trying to do things different in our home, trying to let the girls express themselves. But, it can get exhausting sometimes. I forgot how many problems kids have, especially this week. They're going back to school and everything is a big, blow up, the world is over turmoil. Like, oh no, my shirt doesn't have buttons like everybody else's. The whole world is over. So what are some strategies to really listen to our kids and provide support without letting them suck the life force out of us as parents?
Because it can do exactly that. And it can be exhausting. Just like Marc Brackett and you and myself, and many of us in this field are so driven and motivated because of the lack of emotional intelligence in our own childhood.
Mm.
And oftentimes I will look at the portrait that's in my bedroom on the wall of me as I think I'm right around 2 years old. But oftentimes I look at that little girl and think, how her life would have been different if her parents had high emotional intelligence. And I too, I grew up with a lot of chaos and a lot of trauma. I had a real blend of love and chaos as a theme, I think, in my home. But there was alcoholism and abuse, and being the survivor of that, it has taken an immense amount of determination, resiliency, willingness to be vulnerable, and just really sheer determination, to show up in this world to be the best person that I can be. And so, I can totally relate, to what you're talking about, and the effort involved in wanting to do things so much better, than how our parents might have done it. And I think what comes to mind immediately when you ask that question that might be a helpful strategy is just viewing your child as an individual rather than an extension of yourself, and having a coach and mentor mentality for your child can be a helpful perspective. So learning to listen attentively and ask a reflective question, it keeps the ownership of what's being shared with the child, and I think just being aware of not taking on some of the intensity of the emotion that they're experiencing as your own, and being just very curious, more as an observer, thinking about, out of curiosity, how you might phrase a question to them that will help them get through the layers of what it is that they're experiencing, and just allowing them to come up with their own solutions and their own thoughts and ideas about what's really going on. One other thing that does come to mind is to make a very conscious effort to relax your body as a parent. when your child is emotional and you're listening to your child, share what it is that they're experiencing and feeling, just to be aware of your own breath and relaxing your shoulders and your body and keeping that tension at bay, feeling your feet grounded on whatever surface they're on. That can also, I think, take some of the exhaustion out of it. Does that resonate?
Sure it does, because the first thing you want to do is freeze up and say, oh no, now I thought it was like the end of the day and now we've got like another hour of discussion to do, because you try and keep things on track. But you're right, sometimes you just have to relax, and they do come up with their own solutions. They don't want to know what my solution is, because they wouldn't want my solution. They'll come up with their own. But you're right, it's just being there to listen.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good answer. I like it.
And I think children really need to also know, how a parent is feeling at times. And sometimes if it's late and sleep is important, sometimes just saying, listen, honey, let's just go to bed and get some sleep on it, and just don't forget to bring it back up, the next day. And so, let's sleep on it. Sometimes that does a world of good.
Right.
And let's pick up this conversation when we're fresh and maybe not so tired, if it's at the end of the day. And it teaches them, self-care and to value sleep and, what it does. And we know, as we read more and more about the brain and neurological benefits of sleep, that it's critical.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I know you are such a good parent, though, Andrea. I know you do a great job. I mean, there's just no escaping, I think, sometimes, the exhaustion that being a parent can bring upon our lives. I mean, it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of energy.
But thank goodness for all these strategies. Like each podcast, I'm learning stuff and sharing, and then thinking about what can I do to make the harmony better in this house, because that's really the idea, is to definitely share, but also implement these ideas. So I'll definitely put all the links to everything you've talked about in the show notes. And you've created some incredible programs based on your Goleman training. You've gone into detail about how you would teach these at the young level, right up through how important it is for us as parents and even in the workplace. What would be your final thoughts, just to bring this to a close?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I don't think, you've missed anything. You've asked some really great questions that are very pertinent. And, I am starting to develop some more Learn, Love, EQ curriculum, which I hope, will be even more benefit and helpful to parents of young children. So, I've got lots of things in the works, and we'll keep you posted. So on my social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram, and we just got on TikTok. TikTok is pretty foreign to me. So Dan Tigert and we're a two-person team at this point. And Dan Tigert is creative director of Calm in Your Palm, who did all the illustrations for Not So Scary and What We Feel. He's a very talented artist who designed Hoppy and Poppy's plush and the wristbands, everything you see, the sleeve, everything. And the beautiful thing about our age difference is I'm a grandparent and a parent of grown children, and Dan has a just turned 4-year-old son.
Wow.
So he's early in his journey as a parent. So, we have a lot of different perspectives. But TikTok, so I'm just now getting used to it, or just learning it. So we just started posting, and Dan is doing all of it. He's doing all of the little videos that he's putting on TikTok. So Hoppy Poppy Pink Cheeks on TikTok. And YouTube, we're just starting to gear up on YouTube, and we have a Twitter account. And I share my blogs, which are published every Friday evening on LinkedIn. And that's Renée Adams, but you can find it by Hoppy and Poppy Pink Cheeks search also. So I would just, love for people to follow us on Instagram. We have Mood Monday and we have Tips for Tuesday, and we take quotes from the guides and, just really try to bring value to the social media so people get some good pointers and tips for how to teach emotional intelligence to littles.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much, Renee, for coming on the podcast today and sharing the creative and innovative products that you have created yourself. Thank you so much for your time. I'll put all the links in the show notes to your website and where people can find you and follow you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, well, thank you, Andrea, and please let me know if there's any way I can ever be of any assistance or help.
Absolutely.
Yes.